Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman. Thank you for coming to episode 13 of my first backpacking trip to Europe. In this episode, I'm going to talk about some very licentious behavior of yours truly. Now, I mentioned that I had a lot of conflicting thoughts about women. I had gone from a very fundamentalist Christian backdrop, and now I am partying with Uncle Bob. We went to the Street Fest in Zurich, partied all night. Bob showed me how to really let go of yourself in ecstasy. If you've ever been at a place where there was a lot of dancing and there was one guy who was very crazy, much more exuberant, much more eccentrically moving around the dance floor with the biggest smile than anyone else on the dance floor, that's my Uncle Bob. And I was learning from him. I have referred to him jokingly, but also truthfully in email exchanges with him that he was my prophet of play. He was the true mentor for me coming out of my religious qualms that I was dealing with before I went to Europe. So I don't think it's a coincidence that I went from sort of going to church all the time and then going to Israel and then now partying with Uncle Bob really to the fullest. Spending a lot of time with Austrian women. In fact, in this video, I'm going to talk about some of our dealings with these Austrian workers that were working in some of the hotels and restaurants in Vecchis, Switzerland, where we predominantly spent our time. Now, I'm not going to be salacious, but I am going to talk about these events as we all have parts of our life where sex and sexual tension and rivalries can sometimes play a big part. And so this is what is on the menu for today. So fair warning. All right. So just to give you an idea of how still religiously I was thinking, I'm going to read this journal entry from August 12th, 2003, Tuesday. All praise be to God in heaven, Father of Jesus Christ, creator of all, master and friend of me. I had an interesting night last night, and I feared it would blow up on me this morning, but I have been saved from above. Nessie prepared a most spectacular feast of apple macaroon with applesauce, wine, beer, and weed. Bob, her, and I ate to our heart's content, watching the full moon talking of past and future, and finished with merrymaking. After Bob left, I stayed a bit longer, then traveled to Katrine's room above the grape. There she was, clean, looking good, and waiting alone for me as I had hoped. This beautiful Amazon and I went to Rachmannerhof for a charming night's swim in the light of the full moon. I had thought she hated me the entire week after I ditched her at the jazz bar for Amelie. But there the two of us were, swimming like two innocent children in the night, splashing and swimming around, and we kissed, as I had hoped. And all the past week of awkwardness was forgotten. We lay on the beach, rolling in the grass, fully embraced and enjoying each other's bodies. Staring at the stars, the moon, and each other's eyes, I realized that I did not actually have feelings other than lust for this girl. I did not have sex because I knew it would have been a mistake. But I did enjoy her, bid her farewell, and retreated to the hammock in the garden. But my sleep was uneasy for a few reasons. I had left the velo by the grape unlocked and did not fully shut Mr. Blue. Also, I was a bit cold and worried that if Bob found out, it would estrange us. But I woke up shortly after dawn, hurried to the velo, checked on Mr. Blue, and got there 3 more good hours of sleep up in the flat. When I finally stirred, Bob was smiling, got the story out of me, and kept smiling. He is in a great mood, happy as can be, and I feel the same. God has put his blessings upon me. I acknowledge and thank him. It was a great day yesterday and a fine morning today. So, yeah. I thanked and acknowledged God in all of my glory and miseries throughout my life at that time. For anyone out there who does believe in a higher power, perhaps destiny or just Mother Nature herself, perhaps you can identify with that. I don't, not so much anymore, although I won't get into my personal present-day religious beliefs at this time. I'll make another video for that if you are interested. So I had a crazy night with a Austrian Amazon. I'm not exaggerating. She was the tallest, largest girl I have ever been with. Probably one of the tallest, largest girls I've ever seen. So her name was Katrine. Katrin or Katrine, I forget exactly how to pronounce it. We'll call her Katrine. Katrin. She was blonde, blue-eyed, had a face of a doll, but really ginormous proportions. She was about 6'4", and well over 200 pounds. Very tall girl. And Bob liked her. See, here's the thing. I don't know if you've ever been on the prowl with one of your friends. Perhaps it's at a bar, perhaps it's at a party, or wherever. And your friend kind of likes everyone. And they kind of say, that's mine, that's mine. Even before they get that person, they're already... This is stuff that, I'm recalling from my past. I'm not on the prowl today. Or am I? Anyways, Bob liked everyone. And he liked Katrine. He liked this Amazon. But I liked her too. And so you could tell there was a little apprehension in me meeting her. But I did. I met her after I partied with Nessie and Bob, smoking, looking at the full moon, eating, drinking, talking. So very, very late at night, past midnight, I go to Katrine's room, Katrine's room, whatever, where she stayed. A little nook, this very large 6'4" Amazon, staying in a small attic right above this restaurant, and walk with her to the beach near Bob's house, this grassy beach where you have to climb down the rocks. This is where Paul made his swim in that video, where I spent a lot of my time there during the day, but this time was my first time there at night, and with a lovely 6'4" girl, maybe about my age, maybe a little younger, I'm not exactly sure, who's just working for a season in Vegas to save up money. And we go swimming together. And it was at that moment during our swim, as we were splashing around and sort of tickling each other under the full moon late at night. And I'm doing this somewhat in secrecy. I don't necessarily want Bob to know. And I'm literally swimming just a 1-minute walk from Bob's house. Like he could look out the window and see us. And I'm swimming. Although he is in his bedroom, presumably at this time with his wife, so not that there should be a problem, right? But some guys. Not that I'm accusing anyone, because goodness knows what it's like to be a man and perhaps a woman. But I'm splashing around, and I remember I tried to tickle her or something like that in the water. And it was at that moment that I realized that size really matters, because she shook me around like I was a small boy in the water. It was crazy. Then we climbed back up, and I got some cushions. Bob had a Toyota bus that he called Mr. Blue, and he had some cushions that you could take out and rearrange as you like. So I took those out, laid those on the grass, and made a little bed for us. And we laid on and enjoyed each other's company. Although I did mention that I realized I didn't actually have feelings for her. So although we did get very frisky, nothing, well, I guess in Bill Clinton's terminology, we didn't necessarily have sexual relations, although there was a lot of sexual relating that happened. I'll leave it at that. Then bid her goodnight, and I was in a hurry because I had left my bicycle over at her place, so I had to run back, get her bicycle as I walked her home, and then I had forgot to lock Mr. Blue, so I locked it up. And I was worried about my Uncle Bob. But when I woke up in the morning, after getting just a few hours sleep, I ended up I slept a little in the hammock, I guess I mentioned. did all the things that I needed to do, slept for a few hours in the apartment next to Uncle Bob. He gets the story out of me bright and early with coffee, and he smiles and kept on smiling. So I felt good. I was very worried because if you're ever in some competition for the opposite sex or perhaps the same sex with one of your friends, you know that that could be a wedge between your friendship. I'm not going to make this a long episode. I'm just going to read, well, it might get longer. We'll see. A couple more journal entries. The next one, actually, I won't even go into, but just talk about how my Uncle Bob and I kayaked to Lucerne, so it was about a 90-minute kayak trip. I mentioned I kayaked across the lake with Paul, but this time I kayaked with Bob in these very old 1960s retro kayaks that were super easy to tip, didn't really have great balance. They're very agile, but very difficult to stay upright. So I was proud of myself that I was able to kayak with Bob for 90 minutes to Lucerne and back, but I was in a bad mood. I was in a bad mood because there were these Yugoslavian girls, 3 Yugoslavian girls, that my Uncle Bob termed the witches of Vekas. And I'm not sure why witches always come in threes, but there were these 3 teenage, like 15-year-old, 16-year-old Yugoslavian girls. So this is something that you might not know. At that time, and probably still today, a lot of migrant workers for the long term, although there was a lot of short-term Austrians, but a lot of people who emigrated to Switzerland, sort of like Switzerland's version of Latinos, were Yugoslavians. And just like we have a lot of like racist rhetoric towards Mexicans in America, sometimes on some sides of the aisle, there were also a lot of racist rhetoric against Yugoslavians. Even my Aunt Rose called them the Yugos. The Yugos are creating the crime. Whether or not that's true, I'm not exactly sure. Just thought I would mention it. But there were these 3 Yugoslavian teenagers, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. I think they worked in the bakery, and they were always smoking joints and just kind of being cool teenage girls that my Uncle Bob also had a crush on. And he called the Witches of Vekas. And he was hanging out with them as I approached down a boat ramp, and I didn't realize that the boat ramp was all stone. I didn't realize it was going to be so slick, and I was trying to be really cool as I was walking out there. Like, I was very self-conscious, as a lot of people are, especially when we're younger, and especially when we're trying to impress people. And I was trying to act real cool as I was walking down this boat ramp, and it was slippery, very slippery, and I slipped on these stones and just ate it right in front of them and gave them the largest laugh. Although I think Bob probably laughed loudest. So I'm going to go to the last journal entry, I think, for today. Thank you for staying with me. I know it's not always very entertaining to listen to a person go down memory lane, but it is, for me, fun to talk about this, and I'm glad you're with me. August 15, 2003, Friday. Total. That was the way Bob said total. I had a mega good time last night, so Bob and I went to Freddy's Takeaway in the early evening, where they had a DJ till midnight. Now, let me say that I didn't want to leave Vekas without seeing some girls that I liked. We started drinking with the crazy, sex-crazed cannibalist couple, Denny and Shayla. It was a blast, but I missed an opportunity for picking up on 2 gorgeous South American girls who were totally checking me out and making eye contact with Bob. Then the girl working the tables ended up being the hot chick from the Lido named Yasmin, whom I almost had given up on and never seen again. But there she was, bussing the tables, and we flirted the entire night at Freddy's. Now, earlier, Bob and I had left an intriguing erotic message for the spa girls, ones I had wanted to meet but hadn't had the chance. They showed up, the princess and her friend, and they both sat with Bob and I. Not long after came the dragon lady and her German girlfriend to join us. So there Bob and I were, drinking a lot, with 4 women wanting us, and Yasmin in the background giving me these great looks. Eventually it was time to leave, and we all parted ways, but first we arranged dates. A date with the German girls on Saturday for an open air, a date on Sunday with the Austrian girls at their spa, and I have a date tonight with Yasmin. So it was a great night at Freddy's for Bob and I. However, it was only a little past midnight. We went to the jazz bar where I met up with all of the other Austrians. Karin, Katrin, Amelie, and some others. I wanted to see Amelie the entire week, and at once she grabbed me and took me outside with her friends to a bench to smoke a big fat joint. Back inside, I met up again with Bob, who was dirty dancing with Karin. Katrin was looking good and giving me the eye, and I was thinking and focusing on Amelie. But Amelie's cute friend from Vienna took me back outside to smoke another joint, where she complained about life. When we went back inside, Amelie was looking for me, and Bob had gone nuts. Karin told Bob that I had sex with Katrin, and he kept asking me, "Did you fuck her?" He seemed angry a bit, so I did my best to assure him I had not, then left him alone. I sat bored a bit with Amelie and her friends, then eventually left. It was a wild night. My eyes were bloodshot, I was high, intoxicated, and I had an extremely dry mouth. I met up with all the girls I wanted to, plus more, and I could leave Vecus now without feeling unfulfilled. I thank God for his blessings. It is him who makes me feel so special and gives me unforgettable nights I look forward to tonight. So, as you can see, Bob and I we had our hands filled chasing girls, and sometimes often being chased by girls. I will say this. If you are a foreigner in another country, your stock goes up in the eyes of the opposite sex, usually. So if you are a young American man and you go to another country, depending on the country, girls might be interested in you just because you're American. Now, I was young and somewhat charming, in a way. So I had a lot of opportunities. And so I mentioned that there was a girl named Yasmin who was bussing tables. I had met her at the Lido, something along the water, I think. And she was a girl I was very interested in, a local Swiss girl. And I had finally met her and arranged a date with her. And I think I went on a date later that day. After writing that entry, I mentioned some South American girls. Bob and I were always on the prowl. Bob and I were hunters in the night while his wife was sleeping. 15-minute walk away. So judge him or I or both of us as you like. All I can say is that I let out a lot of my a lot of the things that I was stifling before. I was exploring a side of life, this sort of flirtation, the hunt, sexual attraction that I had dabbled with in America, but it was really coming out, and I was having a lot of fun. And Bob was the best wingman you could ask for, because Bob had no inhibitions of talking to people, still doesn't. Even when I was in Madeira with my wife a few years ago, Bob was constantly meeting people, talking with girls. In fact, this was one of the sticking points that led to a lot of the tension. I don't know if you watched that series, but my wife and I ended up getting kicked out of my Uncle Bob's after a lot of problems between him and my wife. He was still in the party mood, even now in his 70s, and I am now sort of past that for the most part. You never know when it might come out, but certainly not with my wife there. Bob has a way of meeting people, both men and women, especially women, but people he's interested in. So Bob would line them up for me, and I would knock them down, if that's a metaphor you can understand. And so, yeah, we had a great time. We started drinking with the crazy crazed cannibalist couple, Denny and Shayla, although it might be Shyla. They were an interesting couple. My Aunt Rose, who has now passed away, she had some sort of medical condition. I think it was a lump. Did not believe in Western science and searched for all sorts of alternative medicines. And Denny was a guy who had 4 citizenships. He had Swiss citizenship, American citizenship, Australian citizenship, and I think British citizenship. He had 4 passports. It's not even legal, but he did. He was a sort of a charismatic big guy, and his wife. They were most definitely probably swingers, and he was an energy healer. And I had earlier that day, he had come to the house. I remember walking in. Bob had a very small apartment with his wife, Aunt Rose, at the top of this 4-story chalet. And I remember walking in, and Denny had just come out of the restroom. And just this small wooden apartment, the entire apartment reeked so bad. You know, when someone leaves the restroom and you don't want to go in there, well, what was in there came out and just permeated the entire environment. And so this was how I met the sex-crazed cannibalist couple, Denny and Shayla. Denny was an energy healer. He would heal people by putting his hands on you and going kind of like that. Not trying to knock it. I've never tried it. It didn't work for my Aunt Rose. But he had a diet of only raw meat and raw fruit. So I guess that doesn't translate well to odors. I'm not going to go further into that. So I guess we were drinking with them. I don't know why I called him a cannibal. There was something cannibalistic about him. Some sort of bloodthirst that you could feel, perhaps. He was a very interesting cat. And then there went with this whole drama. Why was Bob asking me, did you fuck her? Did you fuck her? He was obviously referring to Katrin, the Amazon, the Austrian Amazon, that 6'4" girl that I had that swim in, that I didn't go all the way, but had that romantic time swimming in the late hours under the full moon and laying on the beach together. So even though Bob had got the story out of me, I had told him that I didn't go all the way with her, and she had told her friends that we did, these other Austrian girls who are also coming after me. And so Bob was trying to call me out, and he believed them and thought I was lying to him. So rumors are nasty. Usually, though, it's the guy who starts the rumor about having sex. So that was interesting. I was looking for this Austrian girl, Amelie, looking for her all week. We see each other. She grabs me, pulls me to the bench, smokes a big fat joint. Some other stuff went down. Her other friend pulls me out, complains about life. And I talk about how dry my mouth is, how red my eyes, how intoxicated, how high I was. I have transformed from once a very pure. In high school, people thought I was the most innocent guy, because I kind of was in many ways. The most pure, innocent, good Christian boy who I once was. And now I'm basically transforming into a full-on hedonist. And so I'm going to conclude this episode with just talking about my reflections on how that occurs. Do you guys remember a guy named Aleister Crowley? He's usually called Aleister Crowley, but it's actually pronounced Crowley. Not that that matters. He was the most wicked man of the 20th century. And I read his biography, and I was not actually very surprised to find out that the wickedest man of the 20th century, Aleister Crowley, this wizard, magician, and there's all sorts of legends about him, that he had come from a family that adopted the faith called the Plymouth Brethren, and it was way more fundamentally religious than my own. So very heavy, conservative, deny the world, ascetic impulse that turned this man, that when he finally broke out of that, went crazy and, was a symbol for hedonism. if even half of the rumors about him were true in terms of sex and drugs and whatnot. And I'm not trying to make excuses for my wild behavior and perhaps even encouraging my Uncle Bob to be out there flirting with these girls instead of perhaps being with his wife. Not that that was me egging him on, that was his own impulse. But I believe there's a correlation between repression and then also its opposite, which is sort of an eruption of that energy that you repress. It's like holding something in, and then when it finally cracks, it explodes. It's like shaking up the bottle somehow. And then when the cork does come off, it just, bam, goes off. I believe this is my own idea, but anyways, you could tell me what you think. I believe that's one of the reasons we see a lot of terrible terrorism that comes from heavily Islamic faith actors, because these people are denied sex, they can't date women, and when you're a person who has high sexual, all humans are natural animals. Sex and sexual desire is a very important part of us. It is a strong energy, and it needs expression one way or another. There's healthy expressions and there's unhealthy expressions. Perhaps you think that the way I was expressing it, going wild and dating all of these girls and goodness knows doing stuff in public beaches and all of that, was unhealthy. We can all make up our own judgments about that. It was a good time for me, but we all do need to express it healthy or hopefully not unhealthy. Repression was a major sort of thing that we had to learn about through Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung in the early 20th century, coming out of the Victorian era, where repression was the rule of the day. And I think a lot of bad things happen when we repress our natural energies. So I think if I wasn't raised fundamentally religious, and like I said, my cousins were raised that way, but I just have a certain temperament where I take things to the extreme. And so I went whole hog, and like I mentioned, protesting at abortion clinics and witnessing and preaching at old folks' homes, and not masturbating, and like really went whole hog on the Christian thing, so that when I was finally coming out of it, even though you can still see lots of tribute to the biblical God in these journal entries, I went way out, and along with my prophet of paganism, my dear old Uncle Bob. But I will say this: we had a fantastic time, and it is a nice thing for me to share this with you. I hope you're not shocked too much, and I thank you for watching this. In the next episode, we're gonna maybe have a little more debauchery, but probably not much more. I think that's it for this for the most part. And we're gonna eventually go on a very interesting trip, which you will find strange, but fun, I hope. Bye. Thank you for watching.